everyone, and welcome to the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I'm Mark Fierro with Vegas Legal Magazine publisher Tyler Morgan, Fierro Communications Vice President Jeff Haney. Thank you so much for joining us today. These may very well be the most partisan times since Watergate, and the discussions are almost precisely the ones that we had running up to Watergate. Our guest today, John Hunt, has had his time in the partisan barrel. He's a longtime Democratic leader. He's an attorney in Las Vegas. He was the Clark County Democratic Party chairman. He has run for state attorney general, and in 2012, John was a finalist as a candidate for the Clark County District Attorney. He is Municipal Court Alternate Judge John Hunt. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
These are some crazy times. You know, we hear witch hunt, and witch hunt came from the president, President Richard Nixon. That's his term,
Right.
Richard. And let us get on back to running the business of America. We can't deal with all these investigations. It's time to return to the business of America. That was Richard Nixon as well. Seems like it's deja vu all over again, right?
Yes and no. I think that one of the things, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you know, one of the things that I think, and you mentioned this word partisanship, I think that's the biggest problem with America today. Rampant partisanship. The extreme left, the extreme right, they think they can just yell so loud, they hijack the respective parties. So the center, right, you and I, the people that really make this country tick, click, and move on, right, we're ignored. Right, and from the political process right now through the primary process, so many times that the mainstream, they don't do the primary, and therefore the crazies on the left and on the right then get the nomination, but by then the dinner's been set, and you know what? One day this country's going to have a real serious problem because we're both going to get two nuts at the table, not just one.
Well, they say the extreme candidates excite the base in your own party and the base in the other party to come out and vote against him. And there's some people say extreme candidates excite the other party even more. So it's a net negative putting these.
I totally disagree with that, because what it is they excite the extreme, and the extreme, they're the ones that they make a lot of noise. You know, the rest of us who are mainstream, whether, you know, I always say you're a Democrat or a Republican because you have to choose which extreme you can tolerate the best. And so when someone says that these people excite the base, they don't excite the base, because the majority of both bases really will have nothing to do with these people. But the media, they latch on to these people. Because, you know, they're in for the ratings, and that's the great injustice. There's no journalism anymore in this country. There's just people that sit in front of a mic, right, and they tell people, you know, this is what's bad about the other side. You can watch, Fox or CNN, both of them are like crazy people, and it's like saying, neither one of you know what happened today. Because either one of you is now voicing something that's so extreme that what's the benefit? Now, if you're one of those extreme people, you lap it up like a cat licking up milk, right? But if you're like most of us, and I still believe that in the bottom of my heart, that if you're like most of us, we sit there and we take that with a huge grain of salt. But, you know, it's unfortunate that our political process now is through the primary system allows these minute minorities to control what is on the agenda for the majority.
These guys on TV may be dressed up like a journalist or what a news person used to be, but they're not. What are they? An entertainer or a rabble rouser?
That's what Fox claims in court. That's what Fox claims. You know, there was early on in Obama administration, in the first go-round, Fox, one of the commentators, claimed that Obama had attended a Muslim school and that it was now one of the ones that was listed as working for Sharia law. One of his communications guys says, I'm not taking that, calls Fox directly, works his way up the food chain, and gets all the way to the head of the news division, and he starts laughing. He says, well, what time was that? And he gives him the time. He goes, that's not the news. That's in entertainment.
Right.
So people don't realize, and you're absolutely right. I think it's a triumvirate of things that have separated us more than ever before. One is Fox, clearly Fox, the first network to be owned by a person who's not an American. The Fox News division was created by the man who created Richard Nixon, and said that the way that you get ratings is the same way that you get numbers in politics, and that's fear. The second, I think Facebook took the echo chamber of Fox and blasted it to a global scale. People listen to their friends, and that's all they listen to, and so you've got this, people are just hearing what they're hearing. And the last is Citizens United, and that is that the parties don't matter because only billionaires do. They're the only ones that can drive the numbers, and if you anger the Koch brothers, you simply cannot win if you're a Republican. It simply cannot be done, and nobody's going to try.
See, I think it brings up an interesting point because as you get more of these extremes, I've noticed it with myself, with the Trumps, the Pelosi's, the Boehners of the world, and so on, that I find myself more centered and kind of deterring away from one end, from one direction from another. But at the same time, you go to the news and you go online and you start seeing more of those red flag news type websites, those Occupy America type websites that just keep kind of latching on to the very far extreme. So I don't know, I kind of wonder if America's sort of coming to a center like you truly believe they are, or if, I don't know, it's like a mixed match.
That's evident right now in all these special elections. You know, every time somebody extreme has stepped up, which if that's supposed to really excite the base, newsflash, guess it didn't work. You know, these people that are doing these shows, and I'm not saying Fox was the model, then there was the mob mentality that followed with the left as well. And so, you know, when you go back to it, it goes back to this country's history in the 1860s. You know, you talk about, it's a simple word then, it's a simple word now. All they are is muckrakers, you know, and that's a great term in American history. People that just want to dig up dirt for the sake of doing dirt, has no substance, has no place in what's best for everybody in this country. Because, you know, last time I checked, it was called the U.S. Us, not we, it was us. And the us I still believe in. I still believe in the us. I still believe in the us when you have a special election and someone loses, that's a whack job. That nutcase the other night, you know, from West Virginia, he lost. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to be ever vigilant from people who can be the cult of personality, you know, because it is a mob mentality. And so as far as I'm concerned, I am still optimistic. I believe in people, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, because I believe that everybody in their heart always does want to do the right thing. If you think that they don't, then that's the problem. Then you want to get on board with the people that are always suspect of anybody who doesn't think like you.
I'm interested in hearing then what you think of the tax bill, because that was the one thing that this round of Republicans was going to hang their hat on, that they were going to be able to talk about this tax bill, and what they're talking about instead is $1 trillion a year deficit. This was, you know, Paul Ryan came to office and there was a huge surplus under Clinton, and he left with $1 trillion a year deficit. Another job done. So how can you not be partisan in that regard?
Well, because in the final throw, right? I think that even those Republicans, because that was a bait and switch. It's like saying, I'm going to give you some candy, right? But I forget to tell you, you have to pay for it out on the way out today.
You also
right?
have to be
So you can have as much candy as you want. You can have as much candy as you want, and we're going to give it to you, and then that's somehow going to make you not think about what's good for the whole. And I think that It's the same thing. You know, I believe in a hand up, not a handout. And if there's Democrats that just want to hand out money, I'm against them too.
Well, I haven't heard any of those guys in quite a while.
I'm just saying that the bottom line is that when you look at a tax cut, if a tax cut is used in a surgical way to stimulate things, that's a good thing.
During the right time of the cycle.
Right, but if you're just trying to give money away so that you can buy both votes for the future, then you're an enemy of the republic.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring up Paul Ryan because he's, for the longest time, as long as I can remember, he's always been such a proponent of we need a balanced budget, and then the budget just basically loses control, and then he steps down, he's from his retirement. So the day he announced, my whole thought process was, I don't think this is a family thing. I think this is I can't do my job anymore, and I don't want my reputation to just go sour for the rest
It's
of
precisely
my
what he
life.
wanted. It's exactly what he fought for. And by the way, to use your analogy, not only is that where the candy is, you can't have any candy unless you're making at least $400,000 or $500,000 a year, and then it's a minimal tax break. It's only when you get into the 9 figures that it really starts making a difference, right? These people that are driving around in 20-year-old Toyotas, fighting for the tax cut, I question that. I think the Democrats have done a particularly bad job of educating people. I think the average American, a good-hearted American, somebody that does their level best to understand the way politics works, thinks that the Republicans are the party of restraint, that they're party of lower taxes, that they're
party
a party
of drunken sailors. That's what
and
they are.
not only are they drunken
what they-
sailors, they're teaching sailors how to drink champagne. I'm telling you that they're out there and they're spending money like never before, but it has always been their plan. There hasn't been one of those Republicans since Richard Nixon. Let's not forget that the deficit was roughly $40 billion a year under Carter. And Ronald Reagan, to his credit, said we have to do something about that.
Right.
And under Reagan, it became $300 billion the very next year. So I don't see it so much as a balance in the party and what's going on between the two parties. I don't think that there's a problem in the middle. I think that this has everything to do with saying one thing and doing another. And I'm interested in getting your take, and I can't believe I'm being more partisan than the former head of the Clark County Democratic Party, but I'm interested in
That's
getting.
the problem. Just because you're the head of the party doesn't mean that you don't want your party to be responsible.
Yep.
Right?
Well, here's the question: Is this tax cut and fighting against people's health care and making sure that they did away with Obamacare? Well, those were going to be Heller's tickets to success. Is that going to work for him now?
I don't know. I think that particular issue, because it hasn't percolated to the center so much. Again, these types of issues percolate to the extreme part, people that really need that help. And those people's voices are generally not heard. And so it's up to people, right? The reason we have all the programs we have is not because of the fact that the people who needed them, their voices were strong enough to make it happen. Those all things happen because people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, know that you got to do the right thing, right? And I think that with Obamacare, we know there are some problems with it, but still, when that bill came and was passed by both Democrats and Republicans, they knew they had to do the right thing. I'm sure that's exactly how they felt when they started Social Security. I'm sure that's exactly how they felt when they Medicaid, because if it was just the people who needed it, it never would have happened. And that's what makes this country great. That's what makes this country great. And the more we do these divides, that people don't feel they're vested and they're not going to be heard, or working together isn't going to have any benefit, that's the problem. That's the big, big, big problem. Because once you make everybody go to their own corners, it's like that story I watched on Captain Kangaroo, Stone Soup, right? I don't know if you remember the story of Stone Soup, but the soldier comes into town and everybody's hiding, and he says, I'm going to make the best soup that you ever had in your life. And they say, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you got to get the best stones. And he puts these stones in a pot, and he says to somebody, but it would be pretty good if I had some carrots. So somebody comes out of their house and puts a couple carrots in. And it's really good if you got some potatoes, right? And it shows you that sense of community. Because this sense of community of our country, this is what we are all about. Because if we're not about us, we're about nobody except ourselves. And that'll be the demise of the republic.
Well, since you were presenting yourself so strongly as, I guess, a centrist type of Democrat, if that's fair,
Yeah.
I have to ask you what you see on the other side of the aisle. Do you see the equivalent counterparts on the Republican
gotta
side? Do
hear
you see?
this.
Actually,
do you
I
find
do.
there are
Who is it?
centrist sort of
Well,
Republicans
yeah,
working with you, or are they all to the
Yeah, who's the
extreme?
Republican
Okay,
version of
and
you?
you know what? I guess for me, those people that have put those faces on in Washington, you can't count on them for just about anything. because they're playing the game. If you're asking me, that do the people that I'm in the coffee shop talking with, the people that, are hanging out with me at the Las Vegas Country Club, all those people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, that's who is driving the force. Do I believe that there are people that are centrist who think exactly the way that I do? I think there's much more of us than anyone would ever imagine, because you can go to the ballot box. But once they get to Washington, and I worked in Washington, I worked in the United States Senate. It's like, the old saying is, once you drink the Kool-Aid from the Potomac, you've lost sense of touch of reality.
Well,
so
that
I
was
used
the
to tell
question,
people,
though, wasn't it?
drink that Potomac as, those people are there. I can't say exactly, because one thing I don't do is, since this podcast, I would never bullshit anybody. I can't go up and down a roster and say, but I think that in my mind that you can see it. So many people on their side, they would sooner not carry the water that they've been told to carry, so they decided that they're going to stay home. They're not even going to run again. And that is a sacrifice in and of itself for the country. In and of itself for the country. And I think that, so I can't give you a specific name. Even like when you look at Paul Ryan, right? If someone said, oh, what would you rather have, Paul Ryan or Donald Trump? Or how about, let's just bring back Bush? When we were screaming and yelling about him, we'd take him now in a heartbeat, right? We would. And I think it's really important, I think, that you step back from it, because if you drill down and you watch those things every day, on the television, CNN. I watch Fox when I'm on the treadmill, and I crack up. Then I'll turn over to that and do the same thing. But I think that I don't know you, you don't know me, but I think that it's that old saying that we're 90% in agreement in everything. And that's what all Americans are. It's that 10%, and they drive that 10% like it's a guillotine between your ears.
Yeah, I liked what one Republican congressman said recently. He was from one of the South, or one of the deep red areas. Mm-hmm. He said, when I'm in Washington, I have to go around trying to convince everyone that I'm not crazy. And then when I go back to my home district, I have to go around trying to convince everyone that I'm crazy in order to stay elected.
Exactly.
I think that kind of paints the picture of what's going on in this current climate.
If there is any glue in Washington, you have to see it close up. It's not something that you necessarily believe unless you saw it with your own eyes. But these senators who have been around for a long, long time, you could not imagine more polar opposites than Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy. They were very close friends, and their discussions were for the good of America. They weren't all partisan discussions. I was there one day when Kennedy said, there's an old saying in the Senate, whenever you see Kennedy and Hatch on the same bill, it means that at least one of them hasn't read it. So,
well, it's funny.
There are some people that,
having worked in the Senate, and when I worked in the Senate, I worked for Senator Cannon. And to me, Las Vegas wouldn't even be on the map if it wasn't for Senator Cannon. He did everything but bring the cars here, put the airplanes here. But we had a sense of civility. Like I played softball for, Senator Denton, and he was one of the most conservative. And there was an interchange. And I think that sometimes I want to send every one of them. One of our greatest leaders in the history of our country, obviously, George Washington, right? I don't know if you guys have ever read it, but he wrote a book called Civility. And he goes, without civility, there cannot be any order, there cannot be any compromise, there cannot be any solution. So if you ever want to read a great book, it's like 60 pages. And every time I'm on a board or a commission, I always give everybody a copy of Washington's Civility.
I also like the point you've been making a couple times. I think what you're saying is maybe get away from the screens, whether it's the TV screen with the shouting guys in suits, or the internet, and go out and mingle among real people. And it's kind of night and day. You get an entirely different
My
feeling.
opinions don't come from CNN, MBSN, or from Fox. My opinions come from filtering what I hear from people that I am in contact with every day. And I've been blessed. My life has been blessed. You know, my mom and dad. My dad worked in a shoe shop. My mom in a textile mill. And I tell people jokingly, I've been everything from on welfare to been to the White House, and that gives me an opportunity to hear different voices. You know, and because of that, I don't rely upon anything that none of them say.
So what do you think we have to do now to sort of change this whole division in Washington throughout the country? I mean, do we need a president who just becomes just like a diehard unifier of the parties? Do we need a third party to come up? I mean, what do you think it's going to take to kind of get the Democrats and the Republicans taking their kids to the same school every morning and being able to converse with each other?
You know what
and
it's going to take? It's going to be take that move. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And it's got to be both sides. And I think that the momentum that we're seeing now in elections that are going down, people are voicing that because no one's going to win. You know, the greatest thing about the Republic is that, and I've always said this: I don't care who gets elected, when they get elected, but as long as the pendulum is allowed to swing back and forth, then I'm okay. If someone does anything to stop that pendulum from swinging back and forth, they're an enemy of the Republic and should be eliminated as soon as possible.
I think it's pretty clear. I've always had something in my office with a pendulum on it, just because you're right, it does swing back. I have a feeling we're still going a little bit further to the extremes. I don't think we're coming towards the middle yet. There may be a time in the near term that there's something that brings us together, but it's interesting. In American politics, the reason that there can't be a third party success is that it cripples the party that they're closest to. The more they hang on, the more that party is hurt. There can never be, I don't think, and I think the founding fathers structured it this way, because you don't have to get 50%. You just have to get more than everybody else. And I think the only way that there can be a third party candidate that is successful is if there's a viable fourth party candidate, so that both parties are crippled. And maybe those will be from the outside. Maybe those will be more extreme than ever. But maybe they'll be in the middle. There's a possibility.
Or maybe the middle will do their own party.
So
And it'll be a
party.
combination of Democrats and Republicans that say we've had enough. You know what? And because you are going to carry, if you're going to be the party, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that's going to carry the extreme, then you know what? We'll attract the center.
I do think that what's lost in all of this, think of this. Imagine that there's this fight between these two giants, and they're just duking it out, and the place is burning down around them. And they may give each other a couple of black eyes, but they don't really know how to fight. They might bust each other up a little bit, but they're not going to kill each other. But that house is going to kill them. I believe that's the case right now with Democrats and Trump over trade. I think trade is the one thing that Trump has right. And the house, in fact, is burning down. If you want to find out what happened to all of the growth in America, that happened to all the great jobs, that happened to all of the education, that happened to all the swirling pools of money, visit Asia, and you'll be able to go visit your dollars, because they're all in those countries. China has used a loophole that was created at the turn of the century, that we wanted China to grow. We wanted them to be a strong partner in trade. And so since 2000, when they were nothing to write home about, we allowed them to have tariffs and to increase the cost of our goods entering their system. They are slitting our throats with it. And it's a terrible irony that this messenger, who is so deeply flawed, this president that is so deeply flawed, it's the one thing that he's right about. It's the only thing that matters right now. It's one of the single most important things that matter right now. And I don't hear Democrats embracing it. It's their issue. It's always been their issue. The Republicans have always been for fair trade. Let's go ahead and let China steal the rest of the place. We're doing just fine. That is one concern that I think is very, very real, and it may very well be the thing that brings the parties together. Unfortunately, every time they've tried to come up with any kind of consensus based on the president's word, he changes his mind the next day. That's the problem. Trade, he's right on trade. I believe he's right on trade. I believe he's wrong on all these stupid tariffs on steel and aluminum and everything else. And by the way, go cut the throats of your friends right when we're about to need them to enter into these negotiations with China over trade. This is a bad time for Democrats to drill down on this issue. This is their issue, and it's the number one killer of jobs in America.
But the whole idea of trying to bring back the jobs to America, these blue-collar jobs, these manufacturing jobs, do you really think the generation,
Yes.
this upcoming generation of America actually wants those jobs?
They don't want those kinds of jobs, but I can tell you this. There's a whole swath of America that to this day, it looks like there's zero unemployment. Well, it's because those people have pulled out and they're never coming back to the job market. Unless you give them something very, very strong reason to. But I do believe this. I do believe that China has a weakness. And the Chinese people know it. They acknowledge it. If you build a car domestically in China and you've got an American car that costs 3 times as much, they'll do everything in the world they can to buy that American car because they know the magic words. China products are crap. If you buy a lamp, turn it over, it'll say made in China. You know intuitively from the second you buy that thing, it's going to die.
But that's a commercial evolutionary thing. It's just like when we were kids. That's a commercial evolutionary thing. Because when we were kids, if it said made in Japan, everybody thought it was junk. Well, you know what? Guess what? There's a commercial evolution. Now, the people in China.
That was Deming. That was an American that changed that.
But same thing is changing in China.
Took 30 years to get there.
Yeah, that evolution is inevitable. What you have to do when you're dealing with those kind of economies is you have to, and like you said, there's some things that Trump he's hit a nerve, right? And the fact that he's going to do tariffs on this, we're all sitting here like scared rabbits saying, oh, it's going to hurt us much more than it'll hurt them because they're so big. But you know what? He's playing the game. And when you play the game, if you don't play the game and you just acquiesce, because, they were the biggest thieves of all of our technology, totally disregard any patents. I've been to China. I flew a hot air balloon over the Great Wall of China. That was my hobby. But when I was in China, I found that we had a bet, and this was before the wall fell in Germany, and before Tiananmen Square. We're sitting in in the Russian was the embassy. It turned it into a hotel, and we were betting which country would go democratic first, a country who had capitalism or a country that had free speech. Well, I was betting both lungs on capitalism. Turned out that's wrong because what you have in China, you have a communistic government with state-sponsored capitalism, right? And that most people don't understand that mix is like the American mix. Democracy is the will of the people. Capitalism, he who makes the gold makes the rules. Those are opposites, but it's the great American experience. And for China, they stayed communist, and Russia gave them free speech. They had nothing, but they adopted, democracies. And so the thing about China is
Except for the elections.
Well, I'm just saying, when it first started going, before, Yeltsin and all those things went down, they were a true democracy. And it was built solely on free speech, right? And China, who they gave their people, and I was there, it was like half people were in the traditional, pajama outfits, and then the Western gear, was that you could see that they were getting these opportunities, but the will of the government still is so strong that we'll let you play capitalism, but don't think that you're going to change the governmental structure. And that's what makes China so awesome, because it's state-sponsored capitalism.
And to bring that to the street, they will fund any emerging technology. In America, some of the best ideas in green energy, some of the best electric cars, some of those ideas nearly died on the vine for a lack of funding.
But you know why that happens?
In China, it was the exact opposite. The Chinese said they would take the 5 best designs and fund all of them, and from those designs figure out which was the best one of them.
But that's the great American mindset. and the American mindset, we could never adopt the Chinese mindset, because in America, as American ingenuity goes, your own ingenuity, and you're willing to take on all comers here, right? You want that success. And if we think the government's giving somebody else, because can you imagine the riots we'd have in this country if they said, oh, well, they picked Marx, they picked yours, they didn't pick mine. This is bullshit, right? And that kind of ideology outlook can't apply in America. In China, it does, because you know why? Because they're not going to question the government's action. So if the government says, okay, they send their people out and they go, find me the 5 best electric car guys in China.
Although we
and
do
the
it
other
every-
ones, they don't care if they die. But they go, we're going to get these 5 and we're going to get them going. That'll never happen in America.
We just call it an RFP here, though. But
RFP?
the Chinese have hit on a balance that ensures that the best ideas very, very rarely get lost in the cracks. Very rarely.
We've got to hear more about the hot air balloon flying. I actually never piloted a balloon, but I have bungee jumped out of them back when I was younger, and nuts, I guess.
I
But
tell you, one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life, I was in Luoyang, China. There were 1 million people who came out to see us.
That's like a neighborhood in China.
Well, we represented the United States.
That's
There
a
was a
very
balloon
small
from China, the United States, France, and England, and us. And we had gone out, and every day I would say "Ni hao Megua," and I love to sing. And so one day, because every day they only have one television station, right? We would be on the television, and we were winning this first ever competition in China. This was 1990, right up when the earthquake was in San Francisco. And I'll never forget it, because I'm a pretty animated guy. I love to sing. I love to embrace people. And everywhere I went, my attitude was I wanted no one to ever think I was the ugly American. I wanted them to see a smile. I wanted them to see our enthusiasm. Same enthusiasm comes from you, and you. So one day the balloon lands, and this kid that I had adopted, his name was Abba, he was shooting hoops, and this kid knew the Gettysburg Address, and he was so excited that he was going to meet an American. So we took him, and we land, and it was like something out of the Wizard of Oz. The balloon lands, we're in this cabbage patch, and immediately a couple thousand people show up. And all of a sudden, this old man walks up. He's a caricature. He's got the round glasses with the purple outfit on, with the cane. He walks over, and I get off the balloon, right? And he comes up to me, and he does this. I gotta show you this. It's like this, right here. And
Thank God I'm not sitting on this
but he stays,
Dodgeable right there.
but he stays nose to nose in my face, right?
Cultural wars.
Finally, I say to Abba, what is he staring at? In my country, we give people a little space. So he tells this patriarch of this community. And when he asks him the question, the patriarch stands back and he screams his answer out. Then I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be bad. I'm still getting goosebumps right now. So finally I said, what is he staring at? And he says, he's looking so intensely into your eyes because he wants to see what freedom looks like.
Oh, wow.
Now, that cultural exchange, right? I found everywhere, because we flew all over China. We were on a train, and I'll never forget that day. I see him today as I see you, and saying how lucky I was to be born as an American, to know what tremendous gift my birthright has given me, And but people are people. Governments, they're self-serving. But and people try to join governments and become part of government to serve the people, but they get lost so many times. It's a path into darkness.
Here's the true measure of the success of a government, and that is that in widely circulated political polling, the Chinese, when asked the question whether they thought next year would be better than this year, was in the high 70s.
In China?
In China.
Yeah, I can see that.
And we know that from the political consultant Anthony Bourdain's show. But,
I love him.
Yeah,
I love him.
Great show. But that sense of enthusiasm, you could see that mirrored in America. Unfortunately, it's the America of 1945, and that's long gone. I think in that regard, we both have realistic views of where things are going for the next year.
As the intellectuals, grab up, on both sides, the debate, right? The one thing that always struck me, and I've traveled a fair amount, is that nationalism is the glue that holds everybody together. So if you go to China, even though I remember when the first time they took us out on the field, they had soldiers, and it must have been like 3,000 soldiers, right? And they're all standing, and everybody was so proud of those soldiers. And then you look at them, and they were like so ragtag, I couldn't believe they were wearing different shoes, but that's not what it's about. It's a sense of nationalism. And I think that the extreme left and the extreme right, they try to break down that nationalism. They try to own it, right? It's ours, and you guys in the middle. And so it's like when we were kids and marching and Flag Day. Those propaganda, but did that make you feel totally part of something? When you sang the national anthem, when you did those things, that nationalism is also lacking in this country, right? When we say it's about, and I know everybody says, well, if anybody messes with us, we'll come together like anybody's never seen. Well, you know what?
What if we're the ones messing with each other?
That's not going to happen.
No.
If there's no economy, if all of a sudden we've cut each other's throats so that there's no more us. And so the one thing about being in China, the sense of their nationalism is unbelievable. They're so proud. No matter what they'll say, oh, America's great, but the Chinese, they're soldiers, and we have the largest army in the world, and all these things. And what motivates them and what keeps everybody moving in the same direction, and I'm not saying everybody has to lockstep. I'm just saying there's a general force of goodwill that comes from nationalism. And, but if it becomes extreme, there's where the problem lies. When it becomes intolerant, right? That's where the problem lies. But if people are tolerant of others and have a nationalistic feeling, that's a tremendous force that you can do anything with that force. You can achieve any result.
I think it started with, and I've said this before, but in the 90s when Newt Gingrich became Speaker. Before that, both parties came together, and one of the most important things, you talk about a club in Congress and who you hang with. It wasn't your party.
What was that called?
It was
the Contract with America?
That was
That's
it
right.
sounded good. The idea was that you identified, prior to Newt Gingrich, you identified with the freshman class that you entered Congress. Those are the people that you hung out with. It wasn't Democrats or Republicans all the time. Hang on one second. But what changed that was they would, every freshman with his wife, with their husbands, with their kids, came, and they bonded, irrespective of party, they bonded. And so years later, when there were tussles in the daytime, spouses would say, we've known them forever, our kids play basketball together, what
Exactly.
are you doing? And there was some
Exactly.
moderating force. Newt Gingrich tore that up. He destroyed that. It was the first thing that he set out to do, and he said that's going to be the end of that. And from that,
Either with me or against me.
Yeah.
Well, he had
and that's all
retreats and
there was.
getaways, but only for the
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
party.
It's
for his
so
own
funny
party.
because, I'm a graduate of, I'm a runner, I bleed Rebel Red, I love UNLV. But I went to school, and one of my classmates was John Ensign, right? And he and I used to play basketball. For those of you sitting at a table that went to the Sporting House, that was like the mecca of Las Vegas where everybody went and worked out. And I remember I'd played basketball with John, and he decided to run for Congress. And because he was a moderate guy, I contributed money to his campaign, and Wiesner and those guys, he was Republican. I said he's a moderate guy, And so at the time, then fast forward a few years later, and the Gingrich thing, and he goes, well, I'm in with the Contract of America. And I go, well, now you've just lost me as far as a political supporter. But because, again, it's like going and drinking from the Potomac. Try to drink as slowly as possible. Because he went there as a total moderate, right? And then, the party, it's like someone taking a hammer and banging you into the shape that you want. The question is, how long can you take the banging and not acquiesce? But, as we know, 99% of them acquiesce.
This is the end result of that in a microcosm. He took out my boss, Jim Bilbray. Jim Bilbray was as moderate a member of the House of Representatives ever lived. Jim would tell me, don't walk into a room and decide who my friends are based on whether they have an R or a D in front of their name.
I love
Because
Jim
some of my very best friends in this body are Republicans. And so when it came time, and it was clear that the United States was absolutely falling apart after the end of the elder Bush first term in office after following Reagan, and the deficits were just going through the roof, and the Japanese had tanked. The Japanese were no longer going to be able to fund our $300-400 billion a year deficit. And so what did they do? They passed the biggest tax increase in history. And Jim Bilbray was one of those people who voted for it, and that was Ensign's way in. So the people that fixed the United States, which led to this giant surplus that created the biggest economic boom ever, this tax increase, was followed by the biggest hiring in history. North of 20 million jobs were created following that. A feat that the only person that ever came close to was Barack Obama, with north of 15 million jobs. But the people who voted for that cured the problem in America, all lost their jobs. A good number of them lost their jobs, and then that was fixed by Bush, who lowered the taxes and created the longest recession in the history of modern America.
And one of the guys that lost their job was President George W. Bush.
That's
for,
right.
For that reason.
That's right.
The no new taxes came back to bite him.
Watch my lips, no new taxes. And he had to relent on that. And to his credit, he did, because he thought that the United States was more important. He's one of the guys that lost his job.
He liked
they came
that
back for
us
another
thing.
bite of the apple.
He was an us.
Yeah.
He was an us.
Yeah.
And that's, in the end, great leaders are people, it's like Lincoln said it best. If you make a decision for tomorrow, for the next day and the next week or so, you're a politician. If you make a decision that's going to affect people 5 years from now, you're a statesman, And I think that when you look at people's records, you got to look at, were they making decisions because it expedited their position in the short term, or were they doing something that sometimes you can't knock people for staying true to school, right? And so if they are statesmen, and that's what you have to look at, what are they, a statesman or are they a politician?
I think
most people are politicians.
I think one place that Trump has absolutely taken the Democrats to school, he just run them all over the place, and he just brought to a head what everybody has known for a long, long time. Democrats are horrible when it comes to message. They have the worst message people on earth. They have the dumbest message people on earth. How many times did Barack Obama stand there and say, we're marking a new era where we've just passed the next million person hired mark? It never happened. Never talked about how quickly the annual deficit decreased. Never talked about it. Came down 60%. What was it 1.6 1 year in the end of Bush? Never took credit for any of it, which is what your mother tells you to do. That's good. I understand it. That's good manners. But it's horrible politics, because he cost every Democrat their go-round in this, and that's why Trump got where he got.
Well, let me ask you this question. Why are Democrats terrible at getting their message out? Why do you think that?
Well, part of it is they want to make everything vanilla for every single person in the room, and it doesn't work. They never take credit for what they do. If you ask the average person, how much did Ronald Reagan shrink the deficit? They'll always, huge. Well, that was a trick question, because he exploded the deficit. And who was second behind Reagan in job creation? They think he's the biggest job creator. That's baloney. He's not even third. So I think the Democrats have never stepped up to the plate. The same people that are in those positions continue in those positions, and I think they're incredibly bad at messaging.
See, I think one of the problems is that as Democrats, because we have such a big tent, we have many messages.
That's
and
what I'm saying.
Republicans, to their credit, hey, they drill down, so they don't have that many messages.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have so many messages from a party that is the big tent, then it feels like vanilla, but you know what? It's a sense of respect and tolerance for other people. So we don't shut people down.
We
that
just
are
shut
in the
down
party.
offices, which is what happened this last
But in
time.
the end, that means that your message has to be more big tentish than if you're a Republican, where like, hey, it's simple for them. We're against abortion, and we think that there should be no taxes. So that's their message.
With all due respect, it could have been very simple for Democrats. Could have said, we shrunk the deficit, more jobs were created any other time since, that Bill Clinton guy was in office, and that's all you needed to say.
Yeah, but we were living off that.
What we're instead saying is we're moderating something looking forward instead of saying, the Republicans have a very, very good story. The problem is that they're driving the car off the cliff in the exact place that they drove it off of last time. These are the same numbers that we used for the last tax cut that led to record deficits and will eventually choke off. The only thing I care about is American jobs. If you take care of American jobs, the rest falls into place.
That's how he won.
Because
the people that were in these areas that you're talking about, that couldn't come back into a coal mine, that couldn't go back to a steel mill, right? And they're the people before, they were the gold standard for America after World War II, right? Those same people that raised their kids, that sent them to the state colleges, that became doctors and lawyers and such. And then Trump just said, listen, these people talk a great game, but they're sending your jobs overseas.
And there was no
and that's how it went down.
And there was no answer, and there was an easy answer, and that is that your party has always failed.
When someone says they're the deplorables, they're not the deplorables, they're the disenfranchised. When people, who was it? I was watching Chappelle, Dave Chappelle. He was awesome. He goes, yeah, I remember getting in line when Obama won, and I was so proud, and everybody in the same place in Ohio. I was so excited about it, because we felt that our voices were finally being heard. And he goes, then, when I went to the election for Trump, I pulled up, and guess what? The line, same place I was the years before, but now the line was replaced by the people who believed they were disenfranchised. And they were honking their truck horns, and they were saying, now it's our turn. Right, and that's what we talked about before. As long as the pendulum swings.
But he brought it home. He brought it home, and what he brought it home was he said, and remember they were standing up. And he said, and Trump is going to fix things for regular Americans. And he said, excuse me, I'm rich. He's going to fix it for me, you dummy.
Yeah, the punchline to that.
He did say
that's exactly what he said.
But perception is more important than reality.
Yeah,
the perception of the people that have been disenfranchised is that he's working towards it. Doesn't mean that there's going to be a single job that's going to be created in the Rust Belt. Doesn't mean there's going to be a single job that puts a coal miner back in the hole. It doesn't matter. As long as they believe that he is trying to do that, and you got to give him credit. He
had tremendous assistance from Hillary. Was the worst candidate ever.
Well,
she's actually fairly good at messaging, and this was an exact opposite of a good race.
Get used to it. You got to grab a new technology. Oh my God, I wanted to crawl under the table.
He outpromised her, and she did nothing to bring up all of the successes that the Democrats had and all the horrific failures. That this new neoconservative Republican group has brought up. To be clear, the Republicans, the old-time Republicans, John Lugar, these guys, they were brilliant. They were centrists. They were moderates. They got voted out of office by somebody who was swinging a dead cat on Fox. They were brilliant men, and they were kicked out of office.
These Republicans, they have this fanatical sort of love affair with this Reagan era.
Yep.
And you'd never stop hearing them talk about, we're going to bring back the Reagan era, as if life was never better than when Reagan was in president. But you've even mentioned it. I mean, the deficit was huge. The Texas,
exploded.
Nobody actually looks at what happened during the Reagan era. But the Democrats don't have somebody that they can go back to, like a Reagan, and say, we're going to bring back that era.
Well, actually you can, and all you have to do is this, with the exception of one thing. All you have to do is bring back the tax code under Clinton. The middle class exploded. More blacks marched out of poverty into places of significant jobs. All of America came together.
But the problem is his last name is Clinton.
That's part of it,
and they can't use it.
But now we've got Obama, and I got to tell you, people badmouth Obama, and the reason that they can get away with it is because the party did such a horrible job of telling the tremendous successes that the man had in office. They just did. You know, they talk about Syria. Oh, look at how he messed up Syria. Hey, he messed up Syria by keeping us out of the war. We don't have any cheap wars for $500 billion anymore. The decision that you make is not whether you go into Syria in 2018. The decision that you make is whether you're willing to be there in 2028, $2 or $3 trillion later. This country can't sustain that. Not when China's passing us up like we're standing still. Not when Korea, South Korea, Japan are all on closer point than we are. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And I think it has everything to do with the way these campaigns are run. They have terrible, terrible messaging, with the exception of Carville and Begala. Those guys I like. So, we like to play a little game around here. It's an important game.
Okay.
So,
I like games.
favorite restaurant, downtown Las Vegas? Got to be downtown.
Was Andres.
Come on now.
Now?
It's got to be doors open. Yes.
I don't know, downtown?
Come on, Mr.
I'm old school. I'm like, I've been in Las Vegas for a jillion years. So
Yeah.
I didn't think, there's, in the new area where they did Bourdain stuff, I go to eat for lunch. That's pretty good.
Very cool, very cool.
All right.
Okay.
Favorite bar?
My favorite bar?
Got to be downtown.
Downtown too?
Got to be downtown.
Favorite bar downtown?
Ding,
Triple
ding,
George.
ding.
Triple George.
Which favorite area to live in town?
Well, I used to live in the best, I lived Alta and Rancho, which was
I just moved from there.
Shetland, Pinto.
Yeah.
But I just moved because I downsized everybody gets a downsize.
So if you had a choice, any place, Southern Nevada.
I don't know.
Anywhere in Southern
it's
Nevada, come
in Southern
on.
Nevada. I like where I'm at now.
Where you at?
I'm at the end of Flamingo.
Okay.
You know.
Southwest? Southwest is blowing up.
Yes.
If you're new to town,
It's
Southwest.
good because of downtown Summerlin, and they're going to have the baseball stadium. So, I mean, I like downtown Summerlin. It's got a nice, new, clean vibe to it, you know.
So you hit it. The ball comes in and you just, bam, you hit it out of the park. Here's your check, $20 million. What do you do?
What do I do? Oh, let's see. What do I do?
I think it gets back to the Democratic Party.
No, I don't do that. I don't do that. But what I do is I start foundations. I do a lot of work with Three Square. To me, because at this point, $20 million in my life is not going to make a difference in my life. Not that I have even $20 million, but you know, if it's long term, I'm short term now. So what I have to do with anything I do have is try to be as effective with that as possible. So to help other people, help my family, help the community, that's what I would do with it.
Ultimately, success. You've had your share. What to you defines success?
Well, I used to have a thing when I was a kid, you know, when you go on job interviews, they'd say, what's your short-term goal and what's your long-term goal? And I used to tell them my short-term goal was always be in a position where my talents were appreciated and I could advance within the organization. My long-term goal was always to be in a place where my decisions had a direct positive impact on the community I lived in. That was my long-term goal.
Nice.
That's very well.
And with that, we call it a day. The Vegas Legal Podcast, I want to sincerely thank you, John. Thanks so much
Thank you for having
coming
me.
today.
People don't usually have to listen to me this much.
Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine. Thanks for doing the good work and bringing some new life to the legal community in Southern Nevada. Jeff Haney, Vice President of Fiero Communications, Inc., the friendliest communications firm in Las Vegas. For all of you out there with a story idea, an axe to grind, get a hold of Vegas Legal Magazine, the leading magazine in the Southern Nevada legal market. You call Tyler at
702-222-3476.
reach out, tell us, tell your friends. Have a good one. We're out of here.